What would happen if a black female CEO walked into a billion-dollar deal only to walk away moments before signing, leaving the entire financial world in stunned silence? The grey sky cast a heavy, leaden tone over the upscale neighborhood of Camberley, as if even the weather itself was contemplating whether this would be just another ordinary day or the beginning of an event that would force the financial world to take a hard look at itself. A sleek black SUV glided through the automatic security gate, gravel crunching beneath its tires on the driveway leading to the Harrington estate, a sprawling mansion with marble columns and gardens trimmed to perfection, where every detail whispered power but offered no welcome. In the back seat, Celeste Munro sat in silence, her eyes gently closed, fingers tracing the smooth surface of a document case. At 43, she was the CEO and founder of Nova Sentient, an artificial intelligence company valued at over $900 million. She had once lived on instant noodles, worked through the night in public libraries, learned to code, surrounded by the snoring of the homeless and the solitary rhythm of keyboard clicks in the quiet hours. And now she was about to sign a historic deal, a $500 million merger between Nova Sentient and the Harrington Group, a move that could catapult her into the ranks of the top 10 most influential female CEOs in America. But that thought was cut short when the vehicle was stopped by a white Land Rover with flashing lights. 2 private security officers stepped out and tapped on the window. "Permit to drive through this area?" The driver presented the ID card, but instead of the courtesy one might expect, it was scrutinized thoroughly, as if the car's color or license plate alone weren't quite fit for this place. Celeste said nothing, tilting her head slightly to observe through the tinted glass. One of the officers paused, eyes lingering on her face for a few seconds before shifting away, saying nothing, but unable to hide the blend of suspicion and judgment in his gaze. After several uncomfortable minutes, they were allowed to pass. The car rolled forward again, but the chill in Celeste's chest remained. She adjusted the collar of her dove grey suit jacket, elegant, understated, never flashy. She had never needed the spotlight to be heard. She only ever asked for respect. And this time, if it wasn't already at the table, she was bringing it with her. The towering ebony door opened before Celeste even had a chance to knock. A woman with dark blonde hair, dressed in a champagne-colored suit and wearing a smile so practiced it felt rehearsed, stepped out. "Ms. Munro, welcome to our home. I'm Evelyn Harrington." It wasn't a warm welcome, nor a sincere handshake, but rather a kind of politeness, carefully measured to avoid being called rude. Celeste gave a slight nod, her smile thin as thread, just enough to return the courtesy. Evelyn led her into a grand foyer that felt more like a museum, flooded with white light and nameless abstract paintings. Beyond the large glass panes stretched a lawn trimmed so perfectly it felt devoid of life. "Please come upstairs. We've prepared the corner room on the second floor, east, facing," Evelyn said, her voice even. Celeste paused for half a second, her eyes flicking subtly. "I thought all the other guests were in the West Wing." Evelyn's smile didn't budge. "We thought you might prefer some quiet." No protest, no reaction. Only Celeste's gaze lingered on the woman's face, a beat longer than normal, long enough for Evelyn to know she had been seen through. The room was impeccable. Ivory linens, floor, 2 ceiling windows, minimalist Scandinavian furniture. But what caught Celeste's attention first wasn't the beauty, it was the emptiness. No photos, no books, no scent. A space clearly not meant to be lived in, but to be seen and approved of as tasteful. She set her suitcase on the chair and stepped toward the glass. Outside, the ocean stretched in a pale grey band, merging with the sky like a cold silk ribbon. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Miles, her chief advisor. "Everything all right?" Celeste typed slowly. "Nothing obvious yet. But the air is heavy." She left it at that. No further explanation needed. Some places speak without words, and the body knows when it is unwelcome. Celeste had learned early how to read such signals, to survive, to grow, and this time to prepare. Because every major deal starts not with a contract, but with the unspoken distance in the way people look at one another. As the clock neared 7 p.m., the soft clink of crystal glasses echoed through a space that felt wrapped in velvet. Celeste descended the staircase, each step measured, not too slow to seem hesitant, not too fast to appear uneasy. Her navy sheath dress hugged her figure with quiet precision, every seam declaring one unmistakable truth. She wasn't here to impress. She was here because of the value she represented. The dining room unfolded like a cinematic frame. High ceilings, Italian chandeliers, a gleaming walnut table set for 20, but every gaze shifted instantly toward the head of the table, where William Harrington, patriarch of the family, raised a glass of amber whiskey. "Ah, the guest of honor at last." He stood as Celeste entered. Celeste Monroe, the woman redefining the future of AI. Applause followed, brief, polite, and no one stood. Evelyn stepped beside Celeste, still wearing her standard issue smile. "Please, let me show you to your seat." But instead of leading her to the head of the table, where decisions were made, conversations ignited, and attention settled, Evelyn guided her towards the center. "Here," she said softly, pulling out a chair. It wasn't a bad seat, but it wasn't one designed for hearing or being heard. Celeste sat down, her eyes gliding over the invisible seating chart already drawn in power. Men at the head, their wives at their sides, then the guests. She was placed between the family's media advisor and a so-called trusted consultant. A young man, slicked back hair and a breezy grin, turned toward her. "You're really Monroe? I heard you studied philosophy before switching to tech." "That's interesting." She nodded calmly. "Sometimes understanding people is the first step to teaching machines to serve them." He gave a faint laugh, turning to the woman beside him. "I thought she worked in marketing. She looks very contemporary." The comment seemed harmless, but landed like a subtle jab. Celeste offered a faint smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." The woman sipped her wine, silent, but Celeste didn't need a reply, because no matter how lavish the table was, it was still set with hierarchy, not just of wealth, but of assumptions. And tonight's first course wasn't foie gras or fine wine. It was the test of how much she was expected to swallow just to stay at the table. A soft clink of silver against glass sounded, not loud enough to draw the attention of the entire table, but just enough for Celeste to know she was being watched. The man seated next to her, with sandy brown hair parted to the side, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar and sleeves rolled past the elbows, the kind of attire worn by someone who has never had to submit a job application, leaned in slightly. "Celeste, right? I'm Darren, a close friend of Evan Harrington. They say you're doing big things with Nova Sentient." "Very impressive." She nodded, maintaining her polite smile. "Thank you." He took a sip of wine, then continued, as if sharing a confidential aside. "Just between us, William thinks you're bold, but he's a little concerned about temperament." Celeste set her water glass down, her eyes fixed on him. "Temperament?" Darren tilted his head, searching for the right words. You know, founders are often very passionate, visionary. That's admirable, but sometimes that passion can come across as unpredictable. And a $500 million handshake needs stability. A heavy silence passed. Then Celeste asked calmly, her voice low but steady. If I were a 45-year-old white man in a Patagonia sweater and all birds, would you have the same concern about temperament? Darren paused, then chuckled softly, trying to pivot. Come on, don't be so serious. I'm just saying what the board is probably thinking. Celeste didn't respond. She simply placed her napkin on her lap, then stood with perfect composure. No one understood what was happening until the sound of her heels echoed steadily against the cold stone floor. No anger, no scene, just a woman walking away from a table once she realized the seat she had been invited to wasn't for being heard or respected, but for being managed. And sometimes silence does not mean weakness. It is a quiet refusal, firm and irreversible. The bathroom door clicked shut behind Celeste, the soft sound of the latch echoing like a period at the end of a sentence, halting a night thick with subtext and scrutinizing glances. She stood still for a moment, both hands gripping the cold marble edge of the sink, as if trying to reconnect with gravity after walking away from a dinner table where every word was poured like chilled wine. Beautiful, expensive, but cutting from the inside out. The mirror reflected her face clearly. A high bridge of the nose, eyes so alert they seemed to question her own patience, and her low, neatly tied bun like a quiet suit of armor. She didn't fix anything, didn't adjust her hair, didn't reapply lipstick. She simply looked long and hard, as if asking why rooms like this, elegant, spacious, spotless, scented with fine wood, always made a woman of color like her think so much about how to stand steadily, how to speak just enough, how to smile in a way that wouldn't seem too confident or too distant. Her phone buzzed lightly on the marble counter. A message from Miles, her strategy advisor. Are you okay? Celeste didn't respond right away. She reopened her earlier message, the words still there. I'm evaluating everything. Her finger hovered over the screen, typing a few words, then deleting them. Not because she lacked the vocabulary, but because she knew once said, it would be real. And truth cannot be taken back. Outside, there was the clink of glasses, the soft hum of jazz, and scattered polite laughter, as if the world beyond this door was continuing as normal. But inside, Celeste knew she stood at a critical threshold, not the threshold of a deal, but of her own dignity. She exhaled slowly, not from exhaustion, but as if releasing the invisible bruises the evening had left. No one had slapped her. No one had raised their voice. Yet the condescension had been poured with the very first glass of wine, and it had soaked through. Now only one question remained. Would she step forward as someone walking toward a signature, or turn back to stand firmly with herself, exactly at the point where she needed to stop? Morning sunlight poured through the floor, 2 ceiling windows, casting a golden glow into the second floor room, where Celeste sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her laptop resting on her lap, eyes fixed on a message left unsent since the night before. After careful consideration, Nova Sentient will not be moving forward with the merger with the Harrington Group. She didn't touch the keyboard, didn't add another word, letting the sentence sit there like a weight lodged in her chest. A soft knock came at the door, then it opened without waiting for an answer. Miles Chen, her chief advisor, and the man who had been by her side since Nova Sentient was nothing more than scribbles on a post-it note entered, wearing a suit still wrinkled from the overnight flight out of San Francisco, dark circles under his eyes. He said nothing, just took a seat by the window and nodded, as if his presence alone was the answer to a question Celeste hadn't yet asked. A moment passed before he finally spoke, his voice raspy with fatigue. "I read your message, and I know this isn't the moment for strategy. You don't need analysis right now. You need someone who listens without trying to fix." Celeste tilted her head slightly, her eyes glancing toward the familiar face, not a look that invited argument, but one that welcomed standing beside her regardless of the fallout. "Are you certain you want to walk away from this deal?" he asked softly, the kind of question that carried an entire forest of consequences. Celeste didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed the laptop with a quiet but resolute motion. I walked away last night when I stood up from that table and no one realized it was already my answer." Miles nodded, contemplative, as if he had already known, but still needed to hear it aloud. "Wall Street will call you emotional. The press will say you're weak. The board might hesitate. Are you ready for that?" Celeste smiled, and this time her smile held a quiet kind of certainty. "They can call me anything they want, as long as I don't have to call myself someone who compromised." The room remained still, but it no longer felt heavy. Because once you've chosen what is right, everything else becomes detail. And in a world built on power seats, not everyone sits steady unless they walk in on their own terms, uncarried by anyone else. Celeste entered the Harrington estate's main sitting room with steady steps, neither rushed nor hesitant. In that sunlit room, where even the floorboards seemed to creak in slow anticipation, William Harrington was already waiting, standing beside the fireplace with his shirt sleeves neatly rolled up as if preparing for a casual meeting, not a confrontation. Beside him stood Evelyn, hair pulled back, lips curved in a practiced smile that failed to hide the tension in her eyes. On the coffee table between them lay a thick stack of color-printed pages, the merger contract, already through 3 rounds of revisions. Celeste didn't sit right away. She looked directly at William, nodding in greeting like a partner, not someone asking for permission. "Thank you both for your hospitality," she began, her voice even and firm. "But after careful consideration, I've decided not to proceed with this deal." The air in the room seemed to vanish in an instant. William blinked, one hand dropping to his side while the other gripped the edge of the table. "You're not proceeding?" he repeated, as if still processing her words. "We're in the final stages. Nearly every term has been settled. Do you understand how much money you're walking away from?" Celeste nodded, her tone unchanged. "I understand it perfectly, and I also understand the kind of company I would be turning Nova Sentient into if I signed that contract." Evelyn stepped in, her voice softer, but edged with steel. "If this is about minor misunderstandings at dinner, I believe we can work through that," Celeste gently interrupted, her gaze steady. "It's not just about last night. It's about how everything was orchestrated, from the seat I was offered to the questions I was asked. I didn't feel treated as an equal partner. I felt like a symbol being polished to fit into a family portrait." William frowned, and for the first time his voice tightened. "If we've unintentionally caused any misunderstanding—" Celeste raised a hand to stop him, not in anger, just with quiet finality. "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a confirmation that this was never a partnership. It was a takeover, wrapped in polite language." She stood tall, her voice calm but clear as a declaration. Nova Sentient will be fine. We don't need your signatures to grow. And I don't need anyone defining my worth with conditional approval. Then she turned and walked out, leaving behind a cold contract and two people forced to confront the reality of power, that it doesn't sit in the paper on the table, but in the hand that refuses to sign it. That afternoon, Celeste did not return to the luxury hotel as originally scheduled. Instead, her car turned into a small community center on the edge of town, where the ceilings were low, the fluorescent lights cast a pale glow, and rows of white plastic chairs had been hastily arranged. There were no branded backdrops, no red carpets, no projectors, only a short wooden podium and a simple microphone wired in from a tiny control room at the back. On social media, rumors had been spreading since early morning that the CEO of Nova Sentient would deliver an urgent address. And within an hour, reporters from 5 major newspapers, 3 television stations, and nearly 24 private investors had packed into the barely 100 square meter space. Celeste stepped up to the podium, holding no prepared speech, only a small stack of note cards that she rarely glanced at. The camera lights beamed directly onto her face, but her voice remained steady and clear. I'll keep this brief, because clarity does not need many words. After careful consideration, I have chosen to withdraw Nova Sentient from the merger with the Harrington Group. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Pens began to scribble furiously. Cameras shifted focus. Celeste remained upright, her gaze fixed on the crowd. This decision is not about finances nor legal matters, but something more important: values. Nova Sentient was not built on algorithms alone, but on principles. We believe technology cannot thrive if its foundation is tainted by unhealthy power dynamics. Over the past 48 hours, I have seen enough to know that this deal would distort the DNA of everything we've built. She paused, her voice lowering but not wavering. I wasn't invited to lead. I was expected to decorate the frame of a picture they had already painted, and I was not born to be anyone's backdrop. There was no outrage, no anger, only the calm of someone who fully understood that real power does not come from being offered a seat at the table, but from having the courage to walk away when that seat was never meant for you. Less than 48 hours after the press conference, the media erupted like a massive crack spreading through a world that had long controlled its own narrative. Headlines splashed across front pages everywhere. Female CEO walks away from $500 million deal to protect her values. Celeste Monroe exits the deal, financial markets in uproar. She didn't need an invitation, she was the table. Her speech clip went viral on TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and even aired in the opening segment of a late-night talk show with the line, "One woman, one decision," and a slap to the face of the system. The Nova Sentient headquarters in Palo Alto, already bustling, now pulsed with a renewed energy. Employees printed T-shirts with the phrase, "We build, we don't beg," a line never officially endorsed, but one that had become a shared spirit. Celeste never ordered it, nor did she wear one herself. But as she walked past 3 young engineers beaming in their self-designed shirts, she nodded silently. Nothing more needed to be said. Investors began calling, not with questions, but with respect, some even admitting, "I underestimated the impact of a timely refusal. You didn't just preserve your company, you elevated its brand in a way money never could." New partners emerged, investment funds led by women, and global networks that had once hesitated now sent letters expressing their eagerness to collaborate. Miles walked into her office, carrying a thick stack of proposals, setting it down on the table. "We have 5 formal invitations, including one from the Dyson Institute. They want to co-develop Nova Sentient's AI platform for urban hospital security systems." Celeste didn't open the file. She simply asked, "Did they agree to our structure?" Miles smiled and nodded confidently. "They said they'll do it on our terms." She looked at him for a moment, then raised an eyebrow and answered with a smile that was just enough. "Then this is an entirely different game." That night, as the office floors slowly dimmed and the city outside flickered like an endless mesh of light, Celeste remained seated in her office. The glow from her desk lamp fell across unopened documents, a cup of tea gone cold, and a phone screen that kept lighting up with notifications. One message stood out among hundreds of congratulatory texts. "You didn't just protect the company, you gave us a reason to protect ourselves." She read that sentence slowly, as if each word carried the weight of a generation learning how to refuse quiet compliance. Setting the phone down, she looked toward the glass wall where everything appeared calm. Yet she knew change was stirring beneath layers of systems that had gone unchallenged for far too long. Her mind returned to that dinner party, the long room, the gleaming walnut table, the glass of wine in the hand of the man who questioned her temperament, the subtle laughter, the nods laced with implication. Back then, they saw her as a valuable ornament, one that, if worn at the right moment, might boost their stock value. They wanted her intellect, but not her voice. They wanted the resume, not the resolve. What they didn't know was that her voice was the irreplaceable part of what built Nova Sentient, from those first lines of code typed in a public library to the day she stood before a crowd of investors just to say no. And now the world was beginning to understand this truth. If you don't recognize my worth when I am present, you will feel the weight of my absence when I walk away. Celeste leaned back slightly, her gaze calm, but inside her, one truth had crystallized. No one should shrink themselves to fit into a room designed to make them feel misplaced. Value does not need permission. And when you have the courage to walk away from tables unworthy of your presence, you become the one who builds the next table, where every voice is heard, not out of obligation, but out of respect. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next inspiring journeys.